fix better intelligence professionals for sanity who die in real time as it was happening. So he's here with us right now. You know him from the show before. It's William Binney. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Pretty good, Jimmy. Good to be with you again.
Oh, it's so good to have you back. And so, uh, so everybody knows who you are, just to remind them, you were with the NSA for 30 years. You were. Would it be a stretch to say you were the top code breaker?
Oh, I would never take that claim on, but I did some pretty good stuff, so I had a lot of fun doing it. So
okay. So if you see, they even made a documentary about him. We're going to put a link. The Good American, and that's how what a smarty pants this guy is over at the NSA. He invented Thin Thread, which was a metadata collection that was actually superior to what they're using now, and it protected everyone's identity. So, and it was inexpensive, so they had to get rid of that right away. Anyway, that's who William Binney is, and he's had the FBI lie about him. Correct? Did that happen?
yes, in fact, they did it in sworn affidavits to the court. They also falsified evidence against it.
Right. Okay. So that's what they do to whistleblowers, and so that's why you can believe. That's why I feel like I can believe you, and because you put everything on the line for your country and constitution, and not a political party, and not your own neck, right? I mean, it's for yourself. You did it for the country. That's a real patriot. So that's why I feel like I can go to you. You can explain it to us, and I hope you're willing to. Can you explain to people, because before the Nunez memo came out, first of all, I don't even think people realize why we have to guess about what stuff means, because everything's done in secret at this thing called the FISA court. And how do you feel about it? No one even talks about that we even have a secret court. Does that bother you?
Well, that court should be disbanded in my view. It doesn't belong to the Article 3 court. You know, the difference between an Article 3 court and this court is the Article 3 court, you have opposing views on an issue, and those views are heard by the judge, and the judge adjudicates based on the law and the Constitution, but he hears both sides. In the FISA court, it's run on the sixth floor, I believe, of the Department of Justice building. There is nobody there but government people, and the only evidence they hear is what the government tells them, and they can't verify any of it. And so that means they're totally trusting to the government that lies to them and everybody else, and that's part of the felonies that are going on here, and have been going on since September 11, has occurred. They've been committing these kinds of felonies all along.
So, okay, so people don't even understand. We have a special secret court that's supposed to be there to fight terrorism, but somehow they got and you can get you can get warrants to wiretap people and stuff, which they did to the Trump administration, is through this court, this FISA court. And so I just want people to know that that's what this is all about, and the reason why no one really knows what's happening is because it's all done in secret. And what you're really describing is it's not an adversarial process. That there's nobody there. There's no defense to the judge. There's just what the government, the FBI, or the CIA, whoever's presenting the case, what the Justice Department, what they say to the judge. That's all the judge hears. He doesn't know if it's verifiable. Times, like I said back in 2002, correct me if I'm wrong, that they actually did present false information to the FISA court all the time. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that came out in August, I think, when they were talking about that FISA court, and it came out that they had basically misrepresented evidence in the court as a part of this. And they're all looking at this NSA data to find common crime.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Well, that's blatantly unconstitutional and illegal. Why isn't it? I'm not kidding. Like, my hair should be on fire about this, right? Phil, that sounds crazy to me. But
it gets worse now. You have to wait for the worst to come along. Once they find common crime in the NSA data, they tip off local and state police to go arrest these people. They don't give them the evidence. They say, go arrest them. Go here when they come up in the truck or something, park in that parking place, go arrest them, bring in the drug dogs and find the drugs. Then, in order to justify the arrest, what they do is called a parallel construction. And this is policy run by the Department of Justice of the United States. What it is they say, okay, we know these guys are criminals, we had it in the NSA data, but you can't use that data in court of law, because it wasn't applied what we want, so it's not admissible. So we have to go find the same similar kind of data, since we know where it is, it makes it easier. And we send the police out to do our own little investigation, assemble that evidence, and say, okay, now we're going to substitute this evidence for the NSA data in the court of law when we find it. When we do that, we can't put any of the statements of where the original source was from NSA. We can't give the court, the lawyers, or anybody in the criminal process the understanding that that was the original basis. So that's perjury. Every time they did it, and according to Senator Feinstein, she stumbled and bubbled and gave this away. She said, well, this program's been so valuable, we put hundreds of people in jail every year with it. Well, that's thousands of people in jail based on perjury by the Department of Justice of the United States. And that's been going on since 9/11. They've been using the domestic spying program, the SolarWinds program in NSA to do it.
So they're supposed to be using these NSA spying, right, in theory, to catch terrorists, right? Isn't that what this is? And why we're willing to give up this certain amount of rights is because we're supposed to be spying to get terrorists. But what you're saying is that they're using the surveillance state to keep for regular crimes, and then they're telling the cops, they're tipping off the cops, the local cops, about the crimes, and then telling them. Did they tell them to scrub where you got this originally from, and then construct your own parallel investigation, or just go ahead and here's the information you have, now go find some of your own evidence? That's what they're doing?
So they do that for them. They create the parallel construction, but they don't give them the raw data from NSA.
Okay.
All they do is tell them what to do once they know what's going to happen from that NSA data.
Right. Okay. So they'll say, like, hey, there's going to be a drug deal that go down at this place.
Right.
And then they'll show up. And that's not legal.
When Reuters reported this, they interviewed one of the federal agents involved in the program.
Uh-huh.
And he said, this is such a great program, I just hope we can keep it secret. This is destroying our judicial system.
What? And so so how come there isn't anyone, I don't understand, Bill. It can't be as bad as it sounds, because this obviously someone would be doing something about it, right?
So they're talking about doing something now because it's being used against the politicians in Washington. That's the only reason they're talking about it. On the common people, we don't matter, okay? We're dealing with the Department of Justice here, and we're not included here.
And so why isn't there more people screaming about, you would think there would be people on the left and right who would be upset about the government intrusion of privacy like this? Because here's the problem, right? So why this matters, right? So if people go, I don't care if the government reads my email, if they catch it, I'm not a criminal, who cares? Well, let's say you caught the government committing a crime, and they knew it, and now they know that you know it, right? Because they're spying on you, right? And then they can now smear you or arrest you or charge you with something before you get to get your. Is that what you're saying? Kind of that's one possibility, right?
Well, that's what they did to us, Jimmy. They made up the information. The only difference is I caught them at it. So I threatened them with malicious prosecution. If I didn't have that evidence against them, and I gave them the evidence, so they knew I had the goods on them, so they backed off. It's the only reason they did that. Otherwise, and somebody at the Department of Justice felt so bad about what they were doing to us, they sent us a copy of their draft indictment on us. And so they even gave us even more evidence of their lying and perjury in an affidavit going to the court. That's a felony.
So it seems like no one gets in trouble anymore for committing stuff. You know, like Clapper famously lied to Congress on TV, and nothing happens. And people see what they do to, you know, when Petraeus, when he gives up classified information, he gets a job teaching at NYU, and when someone else does it, they take a picture of themselves on a nuclear sub, a selfie, they get thrown in the clink. You know, right? So we see there's two tiers of justice, right? And now you're saying that this secret process and this parallel construction and this secret FISA court is now coming back to bite politicians in the ass. That's what you're saying. So now you're saying people are actually talking about, what are they saying? How are they, who's talking about it? What are they recommending?
Well, I mean, this Nunes memo, it shows really the connection with Christopher Steele, his connections with the DNC, and the FBI and the Department of Justice, and the collusion between them to fabricate evidence to present to the FISA court. That's another fabrication going forward to the FISA court to get a warrant to go and spy on just a person in the Trump campaign. But let me tell you what that does. That the intelligence community, once they're allowed to spy on somebody like that, they can go 2 hops from that person. So that means every friend of that person, every friend of that friend. But it goes even beyond that because I opposed it originally, the 2 hop principle back in January of 2014 when President Obama was trying to do something to limit the scope of the spying and everything. So, and he limited it to 2 hops, but he didn't include the little restriction on that I was trying to get to him to say. The restriction is you can't, the second hop, you can't use a commercial business or a department of government to go through for that second hop. Because, for example, if in the first hop they consider going to Google, for example, then the second hop from Google out is to 1.5 billion people per day, which means that in a very few days you have everybody on the planet. That means that from that 2 hop principle, without excluding businesses or government agencies, you can go to basically everybody on the planet.
So let me just
Open it up to everybody.
So let me clarify what so people might be glazing over because what's a 2 hop? So if they give a warrant to spy on one person, that includes or implied in that warrant is that they can also spy on two people like 2 separations away from them.
Yeah, like I call you, that's the first hop. And you call somebody else, that's the second hop.
And so they get to listen in on all those conversations.
That's correct.
What the? I didn't know that. So if they get a warrant on one person in the Trump administration, that's as good as getting a warrant on everybody.
The whole thing. That's right.
And so when Trump said, that the Obama administration had bugged the Trump Tower, what was he wrong or was he kind of right?
No, he was absolutely right. Yeah, he was absolutely right. But I wouldn't use the word bug because they're doing it through the Switch network, so it means that all they do is remotely from NSA they can tie into everything from there remotely by attaching it to the switches. So all they do is say, give me everything out of this building, right? So, or give me everything on all the Trump people, and they know all those and all the phone numbers, so just give me all of it.
And so the problem with this move, so the Nunez memo is about this process of getting this warrant for which gives the government, the FBI, and everybody to get the ability to spy on the Trump campaign and administration. And the Democrats didn't want them to release it because they said it would have jeopardized national security. They released it, but didn't jeopardize any national security. So now their credibility is impugned over this memo, as far as I'm concerned, right? They already got caught lying about it. And so now it comes out, and what that memo revealed is what you're saying, is that you're saying that the FBI didn't give the judge all the information they were supposed to, and that that's a felony. Go ahead.
That's a felony to misrepresent evidence in a court of law.
So you're saying you're going even one step further to say that the FBI misrepresented the evidence to the FISA judge to get this warrant.
It's just like all the other parallel constructions since 2001 that they've been running, the FBI and the DEA, and that's been felonies all along. That's perjury in a court of law, perjury and presenting false evidence, because it denies the defendant the right to discovery and challenge any of the evidence used against them, because it's false evidence, not the evidence that was really the basis for their arrest. It was the NSA data. That was the basis. But they can't introduce it because it's not admissible. So they have to do this parallel construction, and it ends up making them perjure themselves in a court of law.
And so why isn't anyone talking? Like, why wouldn't you think some? So what? I just don't get it. How could this happen in America? Honest to God, I know that sounds naive, right?
I would agree with you. This is supposed to be my country, not theirs, and they're really destroying it. So, but it's not just our country, though. This goes through the MLAT network, Mutual Law Enforcement Treaty Act, through the representatives in all the embassies in the world that they have relationships with around the world, and they pass all this data out as alerts for them to go do things too, but they never give them the raw data. They never give them the evidence because they can't give them anything. And this is clearly written down in the instructions for the DEA and out of the DOJ. You are not to talk about the source of this information in the court of law. You're not to put it down in anything in writing, or any evidence based. You don't do anything like that. You simply give the evidence to them, let them arrest them, do this parallel constructor.
And,
And that's what you substitute in court.
and so what? And so what is it? Bill, are all the reporters over at CNN just dumb? And they don't know about this is happening. I mean, the person who's their criminal justice lawyer or whatever, or their intelligence reporter, wouldn't he know about this stuff? Wouldn't they be blowing the whistle on this all the time?
Yeah, they know about it, but they don't do anything because they are no longer performing their duty under the First Amendment of the Constitution. That's why the free press is there. They're supposed to be investigating what our government's doing and telling the people of the country what their government's really doing. They're not fulfilling that responsibility.
Boy. So like if I found out, I couldn't wait to tell people about this, if this is happening. That's the whole point of having the show. So you're saying that the people in the media, you don't think it's just ignorance of this going on? It's just that they know it and they don't want to report it because it would upset their contacts at the government? What's in it for them not reporting it, you think?
Well, I mean, Jim Rosen, the Associated Press, they all found out about what happens to things when you start to talk about things they don't want you to talk about.
Because then they get a wiretap on you, and then
and you get threatened with grand juries and things like that, you know?
And it always seems like they get used to lying to the FBI. That always seems like this catch-all, right?
That's the ultimate thing. If they can't get you for anything else, they'll get you for that. I mean, who can remember everything exactly when you go in and somebody asks you a question? How can you remember everything?
Right.
I mean, it's just almost impossible. So you always get caught with a lie. And they'll call it a lie.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, they can lie to you and to courts in sworn affidavits and perjure themselves in the court of law, and nothing happens to them.
So, I do think that this Nunez memo actually reveals treason.
Yes.
But not the
It's the
kind of.
founding principles of our nation, the Constitution.
And so, I know that's what we've been talking about for 20 minutes, but just lay out very briefly, how does this Nunez memo reveal treason?
Well, it's the fact that the DNC and the FBI and the DOJ coordinated to fabricate evidence to pass the FISA court to get a warrant to spy on their other political opponents. That's using the agencies of the government against the government process per se. That's fundamentally sedition. Okay. You're trying to destroy the government, really, and that's really what's going on. But also it's felonies, right? The felonies, lying to the court, and fabricating evidence, covering up evidence, obstruction of justice. I mean, how many more things can we add here?
So, how would it ever get cleaned up? It doesn't. I mean, it seems like all the agencies are in on this, along with the court, and now. Are you saying the politicians are starting to turn?
Yeah, I think that simply because it's being targeted at them, they're now starting to pay attention. Until they got targeted themselves, they weren't paying attention. I mean, who do we the simple people of the country, we don't matter.
Right.
Okay? Only those in charge matter.
Does Trump
look in trouble at D.C., you know?
Now, I know you're in contact with Pompeo, correct? Is that an ongoing relationship, or is that a one-time deal?
So far, it's only been one time.
Okay. So, do you think that the Trump administration has any? It would seem like it would be in their interest to want to get rid of this secret court, but then he would look weak against fighting terrorism. I wouldn't see that at all. He forced it out in the open where people could understand what was going on. You know, it wouldn't be a case you couldn't hide what the intelligence, all the crimes the intelligence community and the police are doing. Is he going to do that, you think?
I would hope so. I mean, that's why I came out and said all this stuff after the meeting, because I wanted to confront everybody, including the mainstream media, in the public. You know, out in public where everybody can see it. I mean, you can't hide these things. You hide them, they just fester, and you know, And just keeps going on, and it never stops. So unless you bring it out in the open and shine the light on it, it'll never get cleaned up. There's no chance of it getting cleaned up when you don't do that.
Wow. Okay. So what? And so when the news doesn't report, I just can't get over the fact that been listening for over a week now, and for maybe two, about the reporting on the Nunez memo, and the mainstream news, even what the people pretend to say is lefty news, which is not, it's corporate news, the MSNBC, and they don't tell you the truth. They just like, oh, it's a big nothing burger. That's right. Isn't that what they've been saying, Ron? Yeah, that's what I couldn't. It's crazy. And you're saying it's literally, this whole process is a treasonous, seditious process. The parallel construction. Nobody talks. You would think that
And I would point out, one of my friends in the BIPs, Ray McGovern, was listening to a talk given by about a year or two ago. And when he went up to him afterward and asked him a question. And he asked him directly, Mueller, do you have any problems with parallel construction? And Mueller said, no, not at all.
wow.
And Mueller even admitted to this, using the domestic spying program in an interview with Bart Gellman in 2011 in the Time magazine. It was written up there where he said that he and his FBI had been using Stellar Wind since 2001. Well, that tells you that for 10 years at that point, he was approving all this use of the illegally collected domestic content and metadata on U.S. citizens for prosecuting crime, common crime, and other crime, any kind of crime in the United States.
Well, it just doesn't seem like
This is this pure guy Mueller, okay?
Yeah.
That everybody's calling about. Comey was also a part of that. He and Mueller were by NSA, and they were asking him to turn over all the data on his customers at that time. Well, that's even before 9/11. So they had a plan on spying on the U.S. citizens even before 9/11. So what happened to Joe Naccio? He told me this. I talked to him. They fabricated evidence about him and put him in jail for 5 years. They did that to us, but we caught them there. Okay. So in that case, he went to jail for 5 years. Now, what did that do? That told every other CEO of every communications company, if you don't cooperate with us, this is the kind of thing that happens to you. So, shape up and participate or else. So he was the poster boy for trying to follow the law, and he asked for a warrant written by signed by a judge to turn over the data, and they wouldn't give it to him. That's because he couldn't. I mean, it was a violation of the Constitution to do that, and they knew that. So that's what they did to him.
okay. So why does it? So you're saying no one? Well, I was just going to ask you, how come nobody who's got power in this country cares about that? How come no one's saying?
Basically, most of them are a part of it.
And you're saying because they make an example out of one CEO, the guy from Quest, right? They put him in jail, and so that's puts it.
We'll be dealing with admissible evidence when we go to a court of law.
And you think Jeff Sessions going who's he going to prosecute?
If he doesn't, it's just yes. As a matter of fact, he's guilty too. Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I hear you right. He is guilty, but they're all guilty. It's like the whole system.
That's why it's been so hard and so difficult. They've all been part of the cover-up too.
And what? Come on. So you're saying that Trump is going to come in and clean up the intelligence community? Like that is so.
Well, he needs to do something. He needs to start to do something to make an example of something. I'm going to file a sworn affidavit to that effect too.
Okay. Wow. So when can we talk to you? What's the progress on this lawsuit?
And government is still dragging them out. That's the whole point. They figure they got more money and more time,
right?
So they're going to keep dragging it out. It's because the point is, if the case gets into the Supreme Court, one case did already. We'll talk about it in a minute. But if the case does get to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional, everything they've done falls. All that retroactive immunity, that falls. Everything falls. It's no longer valid. You can't pass a law that violates the Constitution, and that would be a violation of the Constitution right there. So all those laws would fall, and all those telecoms, everybody would be liable for their actions and criminal acts against the constitutional rights of the citizens of this country.
So case that did get to the Supreme Court?
That was Amnesty International versus Clapper. Chris Hedges was a member of that plaintiff in that lawsuit. And what happened in the lawsuit was, in order this issue of parallel construction came up, and the fact that the NSA data was being used against people in the court of law in criminal cases. When that came up, the Solicitor General of the United States lied to the Supreme Court to get it thrown out. He said anybody in a criminal case that was where NSA data was used, they will be told that NSA data was used against them, so that they can challenge discovery of that data in the court of law. In fact, no one was told. And so if I were on the Supreme Court, I would say, I'm reinstating this case with prejudice against the United States and hold the United States government in contempt of the Supreme Court. I would have done that.
And so, are you telling me that John Roberts isn't aware of that guy lied?
No, he's aware of it. He went along with it.
And so they just go along?
They go along to get along. I assume that NSA's got something against them.
So it's like we're living in the land of J. Edgar Hoover, but it's on steroids to the 10th power, all that things you could say about it, right? So
yeah, he's on super steroids.
Yeah. Okay. So when people say the deep state, and other people scoff at them like they're some crazy, but that's exactly what they want them to do, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It's all a conspiracy theory.
Right. Yeah, it's all conspiracy. Yeah, well, guess what? Guess what the conspiracy theory was? The Iraq War was a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Right?
And so Vietnam. Yeah.
So was Vietnam. Yeah, exactly. So it's Libya. That was a conspiracy, right?
Yeah. All of it.
Well, I just do
and Chinese and the Cartier to get this is the fabrication of the FISA court. That's what was sent to the FISA court by the FBI, the DOJ, and the DNC.
Right. Right. I know.
That's called subversion, sedition, perjury.
And so, and you think what would you say are the chances that Jeff Sessions actually does charge somebody over there?
The reality of it, I think, is about 80-20. He won't do anything.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think he should be fired if he doesn't. I got some hardliners,
I'm with you.
I'm constitutional.
No, of course, I agree. I just think it's, yes, of course, that's what's supposed to happen, but that's not what's going to happen.
No? But because we are not included in the Department of Just Us.
Yeah.
Indicted hackers connected to the Chinese military for stealing specs of an American power plant similar to this model and navigation satellite technology. And the U.S. has the most expensive weapons system ever, the American F-35, which is just like the Chinese J-31 because Chinese hackers stole the design. The U.S. says in just a few decades, theft of China make its military world class, and companies technology leaders. That kind of technological advancement doesn't happen organically. Jake Parker has lived in Beijing for a decade and is the vice president of the U.S.-China Business Council, which advocates for American businesses in China. China's system is set up in such a way that the state has access to information that companies would consider to be trade secrets. The amount of information that's transferred to the Chinese government goes far beyond what would be expected in another market. And presidential candidate Donald Trump has accused China of pursuing decades of predatory trade practices.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world.
When you see China, these are fierce people in terms of negotiation. They want to take your throat out. They want to cut you apart. The Trump administration has increased U.S. demands that China stop intellectual property theft and what the U.S. calls other unfair trade practices. The administration has released two major investigations into Chinese corporate theft and labeled Chinese computer, telecom, and technology companies risks to American national security. President Trump has raised issues that have been an irritant in the relationship for a very, very long time.
We're the piggy bank that everybody steals, including China.
That have not been adequately addressed by the Chinese side. And frankly, those issues go to the core of how China's economic system operates. It's state-owned enterprise reform, it's industrial policy, it's subsidies, it's overcapacity. These are not going to be easy solutions that China's going to be able to implement immediately.
That's because those protectionist measures and state-sponsored business development have fueled China's rapid economic rise. Nowhere is that more obvious than China's artificial intelligence, or AI, industry. In China's northeastern Liaoning province, X-Robot is working on human-like AI robots. China wants to be the global center for AI by 2030, and some in the Trump administration believe China is fast closing the gap on the US's dominance of AI. They can mimic facial expressions, respond to questions, 嗨，大家好 and even host a TV show. 今天对我来说 X-Robot President Zhang Zhiyue says his company will be one of the first in the world whose robots can replace service employees.
The main function is to communicate with people, so a good appearance is a must. If the robot is very good looking, like a pretty lady or a handsome man, people will feel more pleasant when talking with them.
Beijing has been so determined to catch up and surpass the US in AI technology, it's committed $150 billion to its development. X-Robot acknowledges that it receives government subsidies, but refuses to disclose how much. Meanwhile, China accuses the US of investing billions on its own AI technology, like this robotic cat mule that's being funded by Pentagon Research.
With Katrina, the U.S. denies the Pentagon spending subsidies and complains China's subsidies are in the private companies and concealed in every industry, breaking the global playing field in China's favor and violating international trade rules.
The Chinese Communist Party has used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade. These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States.
China has built its own manufacturing base that provides cheap and efficient labor, and many US businesses use it to maximize profits. Shanghai General Sports is one of the biggest bicycle manufacturers in China. The company produces more than 3 million bikes every year. CEO Lei Ge attributes the company's success to building close relationships with its partners abroad, particularly in the US.
We work with our partner in the space as a family. That's why we become so close.
That supply chain integration has built up over 30 years, and it means the trade war has hit Shanghai General Sports and many companies in China that sell to the US. Lei has had to let go of about 30% of his staff. It doesn't help that China's economic growth has slumped to its lowest level in nearly 3 decades.
What we hate is it's just more difficult than ever. Of course, we feel disappointed and we feel upset, but there's nothing we can do.
This factory produces up to 13,000 bicycles every day. They're sent to countries such as Australia, Canada, and Japan, but 80% of them are made for the United States.
And arrive in this South Carolina factory. We're producing this year about 300,000 bicycles. Arnold Thomas is one of the primary buyers of Shanghai General Sports Parts. He's the chairman and CEO of Kent Bikes, one of the largest bike wholesalers in the U.S. On every bike frame imported from China, and has to pay a 36% tariff to U.S. customers, and it's higher, it's 30%.
When you pay that amount to U.S. Customs, you therefore increase your prices to your clients? Of course, the bicycle business is a very high volume, but unfortunately a very low profit margin business. And so when we have an increase of that size, we have no choice but to raise prices.
And those higher prices have led to a 20% drop in sales since the trade war began. And that's meant Commodore had to lay off a quarter of its employees.
These tariffs are hurting us very badly, but we're a smart company, and so we'll overcome this challenge by sourcing elsewhere over time.
And that's exactly what's happening. General Sports returned this field in Cambodia into a 500,000 square foot factory. Lei says it's an investment he wishes he didn't have to make because he fears labor costs will rise.
I prefer stay in China, speak same language, and well, it's easier to find workers. It may not be good for businesses, but driving companies out of China is music to many in the Trump administration's ears. Some senior advisors want to continue economic integration with China, but others see China as a national security threat and want to separate the two economies.
President Trump has vacillated between camps. In late August, he tweeted, "Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China." For the G7 in France, just 3 days later, he said American companies could still thrive in China.
If we make a deal, I'd like to see him stay here and do a great job.
On Chinese media, commentators argue President Trump's flip-flops show he's unreliable.
You cannot be in a situation where I don't believe what you're saying, and I don't believe you'll carry out even if you do. How can I have a negotiation with you?
China has taken steps to ensure it's less vulnerable to Trump's trade war threats, from boosting domestic supplies of soybeans, corn, and cotton to expanding export markets beyond the U.S. to Africa and South America. With no need for democratic elections and what it calls a higher economic pain threshold, Chinese TV says China can outlast Trump.
只有个人误判中 anyone who misjudges China will surely pay the price of the Chinese people's steel will. But President Trump has said he can outlast China and vows to hold his ground, even if that harms the U.S. economy short term.
I am doing this whether it's good or bad for your statement about, oh, will we fall into a recession for 2 months, okay? The fact is, somebody had to take China on. My life would be a lot easier if I didn't take China on. But I like doing it because I have to do it.
Which means U.S.-China cooperation is decreasing and confrontation is increasing.
And the trade war continues as two economies that have been integrated for decades are already drifting apart.
For most of the last century, communist China's planned economy prevented citizens from getting rich. In today's China, a life of luxury is supposed to come second to Communist Party loyalty. But as Katrina Yu reports, that's not stopping China from producing billionaires faster than any other country in the world.
Their pacing is precise, their spacing is seamless, and their pores are perfect. This is China's first black-known academy, and they're practicing the exact vintage course. Their 6-week course includes centuries-old traditions, but these students aren't being trained to serve old wealth. Their future employers will be members of China's new rich. In communist China, millionaires are being minted faster than anywhere else. They're filling houses with multi-million-dollar debts. Sarah Jane Poe knows all about the possibilities and pressures of being wealthy in China.
Average price here is probably $1,000 US. Not too expensive at all.
The 34-year-old has employed China's millennial Martha Stewart and founded the country's first finishing school. Many of his students are second-generation rich, born in the 80s and 90s, and born into millions.
In no other country than China have we had such a great amount of change in such a short amount of time. Now they have so much money that the last thing they want to do is see their kids go through any kind of hardship. For the kids, a lot of it is about individuality. They want to spend on something that other people don't have. It's really good for summer.
Sarah Jane is an expert on where to shop, what to wear, and where to be seen. At an upmarket Italian restaurant in downtown Shanghai, Sarah Jane shares a Michelin-starred meal with her social media followers.
It's so good.
Lunch costs about $400. That's the equivalent of a monthly middle-income salary.
When you make so much money in such a short amount of time, it actually places a lot of pressure on an individual. There's no old money in China because of historical reasons. A lot of people are very poor, everybody's very poor up until the 90s.
Accumulating wealth in communist China was once considered counter-revolutionary. Mao Zedong came to power in 1949, vowing to eliminate class and abolish capitalism. Affluent families lost their wealth, many lost their lives, as Mao pursued his utopian vision of communism. That vision resulted in the deaths of tens of millions from famine and left almost 90% of the population living in extreme poverty. That all changed in the 1980s when leader Deng Xiaoping loosened state control over China's economy and permitted private enterprise, reforms which would turn the country into the world's second largest economy. 30 years later, Chinese cities have become shopping meccas, catering to China's rapidly expanding middle class and upper class. Chinese consumers make up a third of the $1.3 trillion global luxury market, and luxury spending is expected to grow by over 10% this year. It's a trend Liang has in the bag. The 26-year-old is known as Mr. Bag, an entrepreneur and one of the country's top online influencers. He has millions of loyal fans who hang on his every recommendation. During an online campaign last year, his company sold $500,000 worth of bags in just 6 minutes.
Sadly, some countries buy bags because they want big brands. They want people to know they're rich. They want people to know they're tasteful. But nowadays, I think a lot of Chinese women, when they buy bags, they really buy bags because they want to pursue happiness.
International brands are working hard to contribute to the happiness and handbag collections of Chinese consumers, but they don't always get it right.
Sometimes girls and the Japanese.
Last November, Dolce & Gabbana stroked fury after releasing this advertising campaign in China.
其他体育跟甜点儿，对你们来说是太大了吗？
Chinese social media users accuse the brand of reinforcing racist stereotypes. Consumer backlash resulted in Dolce & Gabbana being banned from Chinese online retailers. Versace, Givenchy, and Coach issued apologies after printing T-shirts describing Hong Kong and Taiwan as separate from China.
Fallout of foreign fashion labels have demonstrated the power of China's increasingly wealthy population. But being wealthy in China has its limits. When it comes to the Chinese government, being too rich can be risky.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has launched an anti-corruption campaign and overseen investigations into the country's wealthiest and most powerful. More than 100,000 have been jailed for embezzlement and bribery. Others fired for throwing lavish parties and indulging in expensive liquor. Ostentatious wealth is regularly denounced on state media and primetime TV.
Hi, say hi.
The hit television show, Father, Where Are You Going?, was cancelled because of its portrayal of spoiled second-generation rich children. Commentator and academic Zhu Dahe says it's in the government's interest to rein in crazy rich behavior.
因为这个书也看到，就是 the Chinese government knows that if rich people show off their wealth too much, it will give them the impression of social polarization by ordinary people. The Chinese government requires rich people to be low-key and poor people to be content with their life. Then the country will be stable.
China's ultra-wealthy must closely align themselves with the government. Jack Ma, a tech tycoon with an estimated $40 billion fortune, is a member of the Communist Party.
I feel proud for what President Xi said yesterday.
Movie star Jackie Chan routinely defends Beijing and attacks international critics. Last month, the Hong Kong resident described pro-democracy protests in the city as sad and depressing and called himself a protector of the Chinese flag.
所以定期第一个条件 you must firstly be on the same side as the government. For the government can feel they may be successful. All of the successful people should stand on the same side with the government. If you do not support them, they will make you unsuccessful.
The government has vowed to eradicate poverty by 2020, saying it's lifted 83 million ruble poor out of poverty over the last 6 years. According to the World Bank, many more remain behind. 27% of the country's population dead. Others build roofs for their dogs. Zhou Qianshao spent $500,000 on a pet paradise for his border collie Sila, complete with a training gym, a dog-themed party space, and an indoor doggy pool. Zhou Qianshao grew his fortune selling pet products online. He showed us a wall decorated with photos of his best friend, who he credits with lifting him out of depression.
养孩子一样吧. It's like raising a child. I have deep affection for my brother. I rarely take photos of myself. When someone asks me, how should I introduce you, I say, call me Silas Dad. He's integrated into every part of my life.
In China, the richest 1% own a third of the country's wealth. Zhou says he's bombarded online by critics who question his choice to splurge on a dog while millions must fight to survive. But the only opinion he cares about is silence.
他并不会关心你是一个什么人，
He never cares about who you are or your social
你
status.
的生活状态。没有人会觉
People
得
think I'm some silly spoon kid wasting my parents' money by giving my dog a life insurance. That's not true. I work hard and experience challenges.
少也好。
It's normal to be criticized. I don't care. Part of the money you earn pays for the criticism you get. My mind is at peace.
In China, it seems there's very little money can't buy.
Technology has helped China achieve extraordinary growth and wealth. The critics say it's facilitated a surveillance state. We begin the first of two stories focusing on Chinese technology in a remote area that's becoming more connected. In China's Lifu Mountains, past rolling hillside farms, the remote city of Guilin is nestled into a valley and goes along a river that's been inhabited for 10,000 years. Today, this old town is getting older, the population is older, and often needs medical care. The closest hospital is far, so on this day they line up for a mobile clinic and a bus. Visiting specialists have a small room in the back for x-rays, and in nearby rooms for eye specialists to check for cataracts. In this clinic, everything is electronic, and all the patient records and data feed into a single phone application. It's made by the company Ping An, and the app is called Good Doctor. Local doctor Luo Jiangsong says the technology changes everything.
Before we had this platform, patients had to go so far away. It was a big burden. Now, with this platform, it saves both money and time.
For decades, a country that suffered from widespread rural poverty relied on so-called barefoot doctors to provide remote areas medical care. Today, technology, from medicine to telecommunications to artificial intelligence, is helping transform the country.
China is quite unique because it's been a rapidly developing country. So we have very uneven distribution. Technology helps to bridge those gaps and deliver service, particularly in an environment like this.
Just Japan's the co-CEO of Ping An, who's building towers over Shenzhen, China's Silicon Valley. Ping An boomed financially into the world's second largest insurance company, celebrating by turning old insurance into new tech. In September, Ping An unveiled new facial recognition software for drivers. Those markings judge whether she's a good driver. But in communist China, who decides who has nothing to hide? The government is now converting data on its citizens into social credit scores. It's called Sharp Eyes, and those eyes are electronic thanks to the world's most advanced surveillance. The 5 most surveilled cities in the world are Chinese. China now has more than 200 million cameras, including at the entrance to an international conference. The cameras use software that recognize not only faces, but also how people walk, and can then track as they move. That allows the cameras to judge their behavior. In Shenzhen, cameras watch this intersection. If people's data, they're publicly shown and their faces are displayed on screen.
Do you think because that camera is there, more people cross legally?
Of course, they're afraid to be seen doing something inappropriate. They will change their behavior.
就罚分呐、比如说你过马路啊，会罚分。
Behavior change is exactly what the government wants. The credit score system is so important, there's even a Communist Party produced National Credit magazine. 那个CLN is the editor-in-chief.
中国的这个体制的目
The Chinese companies, businesses,
You need to be calm. You cannot refuse to be angry. Not too rigid or serious.
And minutes later, she did come back to finish the interview. Everything okay? She said everything was okay, but the government's critics say everything is not okay, because they say China's big data is becoming big from cameras to inside their phones. They organize these rallies offline because they believe police hack into their messaging.
we are
Well, thank you. You didn't have to bring that. I'll come down.
All of the science fiction writers, in the vast majority, have gotten it wrong. Almost all of the science writers have gotten it wrong. The reason we don't have time travel is because we don't understand it. If we understood it, we wouldn't even try for time travel. As the pulse crosses itself, it creates complexity. As complexity reaches a certain stage, it condenses into matter. The first matter condenses. Each and every unit brings in space and time. Space merges with other space, and time complements other time, but it does not merge. There's some other time. We have different concepts about time, and we express these all under the umbrella of time. But it's really remnants of the war of the states between the states and the final death of the slavery aspects of it, crumbling of all of that infrastructure, as well as that quality of the sort of stickiness, the hot, mugginess that you get on a southern night that seems to make the night itself go a lot longer, as opposed to, the cold nights in the cabin, but where you pop right up and get that fire moving now and activating that vagus nervous system. And we would not be able to tell. We wouldn't be able to tell if it was actually made into the time that is within each of the little elements that we call atoms that go into building up our cells, like all the spaces there. There are aspects of time that the universe will put in front of us. And the universe will basically say, okay, here's a challenge for you. And action in this body's life. Now, we need not react in any particular way. It's up to us. We can defer those 30 days as being the most accurate. And so I recently run it, the point of the time enough for woo is that we can talk about the woo aspects of time here, and thus our feeling of it, and how we're all perceiving it weird, and that this year, 2021, is not at all like last year, and last year was not like the year before. It actually exists as a Martian insect. We haven't found it yet, but this is a woo, which is I thought it was a Martian insect, but hey, it turns out to be an artifact of the software that stitched together the Gigafan conclusion in critical thinking. Okay, so now a Ruby is a conclusion in critical thinking, where you stop and you analyze yourself as you're going on and say, oh, hey, something weird is here, and I'm making a mistake in terms of my impression of it. Now, a lot of woo guys don't do that. They say, oh my God, it's a UFO, and then they stick with that forever without examining actually what's going on. I want to know, so I don't trap myself in a belief system. So I didn't believe in the Woobies, I was just fascinated by it. And now I know that Woobies are in fact a legitimate thing to be watch out for. The reason that I see for the rich, where they take everything from the poor and share it among themselves, or fight about it among themselves. Communism has never worked, and that should continue out to April 14th, in that time frame. Some point in May was when we were going to get this process that would result in what we can think of as a release, secret reveal, release of UFO information, with an intent of relieving just for the past, like Antifa and so forth. Once they destroy, they get the urge to raise up and that kind of stuff, and they're done. So, it's only for extremely narrow range of time that people can be in Antifa. You're not going to have 60-year-old Antifa guys out there rioting. You may have it now with twisted boomers and stuff, but I'm saying that people that started as Antifa in their 20s are not going to be in Antifa in their 60s and hold the same mindset. This isn't going to happen. A year, when you're in charge of some kind of head thing or road thing or, riparian stream thing or something like that in Washington, D.C., and $120,000 a year now, if you could find one, all of your $120,000 for that whole year, if you could have it all in your hand once, without, I have $120,000 without having to pay taxes on it. Well, maybe it would buy you 5 cents a gas. So, it might be that the hyperinflation is not bad. And at that stage, people won't go to work. They'll just simply not show up because there's no economic incentive for them to do so. In fact, they like scrambling for food to eat and, these kinds of things. And many of the feelings you're having during this period of time can be attributed to these strange energies. Again, yeah, you're absolutely.
You do have a lot of wealthy economies in Europe that can subsidize these poor economies if they want to. I think it's a mistake, but they might make those mistakes because politicians often do those things. They want to kick the can down the road rather than deal with it. And so they can do that in Europe. They can afford to. There's enough wealth for somebody else who didn't care about the value. Okay, we're going to look for that greater pool. Well, the problem is the deal was so big that all the fools bought on the idea. And there were no greater fools left. They were all in. And then, when they didn't get the big pop, right, they actually bothered to look at what they own. Okay, I got these shares of Facebook. And they looked at, in which case the money loses value. And the purchasing power is gone. And you might end up losing more purchasing power. It might be better to get 50 cents on the dollar, where your 50 cents still has value, than to get 100 cents on the dollar, where it feels like you got 10 cents. Because that's how much prices have gone up. And they said, we needed those training wheels for a while because the economy was a real mess. And so we needed the training wheels to get the bike on the cliff with those stimulus wheels. And so if we don't take the stimulus away, we're going to go over that cliff. And we're not going to survive the impact.
So it's better to take the wheels off now and just let the bike fall over. And they percentage, it was like 10%, and the governmental bureaucratic side, right, that some of them may not know what's going on, they kind of start looking into it, but then when they find out who's doing it and somebody contacts them, then they stop, right? Because you had, after the Cuban embassy attack, you had Marco Rubio, Tom Cotton, and I forgot the other one, but they did a Senate investigative committee on the Cuban embassy attack. Right when Marco Rubio started mentioning remote microwaves, those ended like that. You saw Niels Melzer, right? Niels Melzer, was going after this in human rights councils and everything like that, and all this data and stuff like that. Probably somebody contacted him or he found out how big this was and who's actually doing it to the military-industrial complex, and then he had to back off for a time, or he's gonna I think he's still trying to work on it, but I would imagine there's some threats in there, and that he didn't know what he was like. He didn't know, like he was probably like, oh, well, there's some rogue groups in each country just doing this. He didn't know how organized it is and how much money is involved in it. I think Niels Melzer's still doing stuff against this, though. I want to get more information on that. It says create a problem and have justify these morons' paychecks. I got a lot of interceptions while driving. Yeah, it's all about creating problems, guys. They're doing this cycle, this Hegelian dialectic on the human race, right? And so, now they're, all the things, stealing the presidency, all the riots and everything like that. Declaring everyone who supported Donald Trump, and pretty much if you're terrorist, so victims complain of small drones spying through their windows. Their cell phones and computers are hacked and fried. Yeah. Home burglaries. I want to give examples all through this, but the article's very long. Home burglaries and vandalism are among the other complaints of the targeted individuals I spoke with. They also claim their harassers run noise campaigns of strategically timed jarring sounds. Monster pickup trucks with loud mufflers roar down the street, and cars blare their horns and steal their tires at all hours. Yeah. And car alarms, like when I walk out car, like even in the morning, but mostly if it's at night, I'll walk out to my car in the parking lot and nobody's out there, nobody's going to their car. Somebody either pushing their key to lock the car and do that to me when I'm out there. So I'm like, who did that? Or turning the car over. Nobody's out there. Nobody's going to the car. I get that all the time. To me, like going through the torture for so long, I really do have no reaction. Like my attackers can remote neural manipulate some kind of frustrated reaction, but it's been going and catch a bullet and still not flinch anymore. LOL, after 5 years of this BS, it makes me numb. Yeah, and that's a terrible thing. Sitting here on a live stream and literally have been tortured for so long with microwaves, bending, using all this weird stuff every night and every day, and trying to just like hunker down when I feel bad. And then it's like I'm trying to get the information. They're literally messing with my memory so I can't get it out good. And then people are like, hey, these people think this is happening still, right? And it's been going on for so many years. So it's completely insulting, but it's better than it was a little while back, a couple of years ago. Right, that's my point. Charles Hall says there can be only one. Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of the universe. Drunken Ninja says, don't worry, I'll find a way to figure out and stop this guy. Thanks, man, that's great. That's awesome. I'm glad. Hurry up. Hurry up, man.
That's awesome. So Drunken Ninja's gonna stop this once he figures out something to stop it. Okay. They also hear voices. Some target individuals believe wait. Did I read that one? Okay, we read that one. They also some targeted individuals believe the voices and insults are coming from B2K, a microwave technology known as voice-to-skull communication. The microwave technology is one piece of an arsenal of directed energy weapons used to harass and torture these people like. I don't know why they're putting directed energy weapons in quotation marks, because later on she says directed energy weapons do exist, and then lists a bunch of sources for it, and we all know that directed energy weapons exist, so I don't know why they put that in quotation marks. And B2K is really real. Like, the woman on my B2K right now is saying we got to turn this off. I don't want to do this anymore. You know, because I want to sing on my live stream. So if that's okay with you. The one. Are y'all gonna be like Neo in the Matrix? I was like, man, I saw Highlander, the Highlander 2, the one where I was gonna watch every place in the world where people are being harassed and microwaved to death. It's just because people can't see it with their eyes when they walk outside, right? And I guess that makes people even participating, because they're like, oh, these people are saying they're being hit with microwaves. They must be crazy. We'll participate in the gang stalk. So they end up gang stalking somebody who's being hit with microwaves because they think that person thinks they're being hit with microwaves is crazy. You see how the lies, when lies start, and a system is built on lies. This system, it wasn't built on lies. I think a regular form of government in America, I guess it was built on lies, but there was a good, okay, I don't want to get too complicated, but our system's been corrupted, right? It's built on lies, right now. And when you have that, when you have deceit, and deceit is part of somebody's job, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's why people like Jeff censored me. I'm like, lying and deceit is the most thing ever. It's the most dangerous thing ever. And I'm talking about Brian. Hey, Brian. Brian says CIA and NSA operatives can induce directly into your brain both visual images and auditory sequences, such as voice to skull, via a bidirectional stream of electromagnetic low frequency waves. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Dennis says with watching Outer Limits last few days, a lot of these SD scientists were watching that because a lot applies to what these weirdos are trying to accomplish. One on transhumanism yesterday. Yeah, I wonder about that show, Dennis. I watched it when I was younger. There's so many episodes about. There's this one episode. A lot of those episodes, I think they were. I mean, I think it was. I think it serves two purposes. It's like science fiction like that is preconditioning, and it's preconditioning for people. But it's also putting those ideas into the heads of scientists so that when they create later, they end up using things like that, matching things like that. So you get both of those things happening. You get a lot of things happening. But I do think it's purposeful predictive programming. And then it's like in Star Trek, they had the little flip thing, right? The flip communicators, and the person who created the flip phone used that, right? That came out of that. There's a little bit of matching science and technology, and it's new advancements kind of matching science fiction because somebody maybe saw it when they're a kid, and they're scientists working on some of these weapon systems in the future. But then there's also predictive programming where it's neither. Their DHS fusion centers are global. With a DHS fusion center in London, and they're like this all over the world. And then you got InfraGard for the FBI in America. But then whatever agency is in other countries, it would be kind of a version of that. And then you've got kind of the same version of organization, right? But with it'd be a little bit different in other countries. What everything's called. and it's very real. This is very real, and it's a recommended target individual videos in my YouTube stream, and we're shadow banned. So I just couldn't predict how corrupt everything was going to get. I was just thinking, okay, 1990 humanity mentality. There are people getting hit with microwave weapons. This isn't going to stand. Get very angry about this. I mean, God, when makeup is tested on animals, people rail and have protests. People being microwaved to death looked into, right? Basically, I just couldn't even expect, and I do think one angle out of many of the pandemic and all these things being pushed forward, like the New World Order pushing the Great Reset and, violently trying to destroy America, like by using other countries and, a bunch of Cold Warfare with this technology too. And I forgot my point of it. See, it's like I'm going, but when you're talking, your short-term memory is used to finish what you're saying. Okay, we'll just move on. I'll maybe remember it later. Brian says, and everybody check out, think that people are going to talk about something and they can't really stop it. It's going to be a big topic. They'll put people in to talk about it and kind of steer narrative. I mean, it becomes a mess, right? I don't know. I don't want to give y'all too much advice on that because I'm dealing with some serious issues of trying to get along, like trying to keep moving, waiting on, no, not waiting on, I've had many miracles from God, and I'll always, true. True Kitten says it's a weaponized system that is organized by group harassment called stalking by proxy. Yeah, that's a good way to say it, stalking by proxy. Because the organizations are doing it, right? DHS Student Centers, InfoGuard, Community Watch, Sheriff's Department. I'm still questioning whether they've never put anybody in this apartment above me, and it's owned by the Sheriff's Department. And I hear people walking around and putting stuff down, but I'm like, it doesn't sound like my VPK, but I'm like, could that just be sound projection? I'm still confused on that. I'm like, I'm a pretty smart guy. Knock on the door, nobody's there, and I don't want to cause a scene because they're just, looking for any reason to give my mom a fine. She'll probably have to pay the fine for me if I get a fine or get in trouble here or anything like that. What's the world? Can somebody help me out? What's the World Financial Organization? Is that what it's called? They're putting out all these. I want to go over one of those videos where they basically like just out them. They're like, yeah, we're doing the Great Reset after this huge pandemic. It might seem like it is, what is that? Where's that going to get us? I saw a video like that a while back and just cemented in my brain. This is what YouTube has become. Millions of views for Fallen Angels cut down a bunch of forests sometimes. That's what people want to see. But there's, in the reality, in the real information you look at, there's much hope. There's much hope. And in spiritual things too. Now, I'm not trying to poo-poo fallen angels or anything. I kind of believe in those. But just the information, it's like, but we don't be and not thinking about it. He's like, are y'all ready? He'll say, are you ready? Why would my schizophrenia say something like, are you ready? Like that? A Google search. We go through all of that. Anything that we can get our hands about what people are applying for, right? But there's so many people involved in this, and they're just like, some people are hard up, whatever, and they're just doing whatever. Then some people will sign up for it, thinking that they're helping out fight terrorism and all. So just a bunch of people do it, especially in, I think, your democratic states. It can get really bad on the Biden, but more people pulled into it is bad, but it would sure bring it out faster, right? Which is what I'm going for, which is what y'all are going for. I think we can do it. I don't think we can. I don't know, my brain just can't go back. Hey, Ann, Ann says, hey, Carl, hey, everyone from UK. I hope you're doing okay, and I hope everybody's doing okay. Some moving forward videos of what can we plan, what's going on, who, does anybody have, just getting information about, like, has anybody heard anything about the UN? What's going on with Neil Melzer? Yeah, Stephen Luther says Snowden got asylum in Russia. I know that I was thinking, and even research this when you're organizing and getting out information, that can be very good to organize thoughts too. It can be transitioned through monitors. It can be modulated so that it comes up on the monitor, right? So frequency to shower, we'll have to say, like, I didn't know until 2008, that about the New World Order plans and everything, but a lot of people have known a lot longer than that, you know. Then he says he and others are gathering scientific evidence to show the government is testing directed energy weapons on the general population. He further claims that legal actions, motions, affidavits, and injunctions will be used to try to stop it. I think that's an angle that we need, right? We've been trying. I don't know. Target justice hasn't been. They've been successful in finding arbitrary people have been. Then it's like once I start doing a live stream, it feels completely different, right? Because my brain's in a different state right now. I'm talking to y'all, I'm reading this article and stuff. When I'm not doing a video, and I'm playing video games, I'm like alone. They can mind control me a lot more not to want to do it, right? Not to want to do it, and in a way that you're comfortable with life and you can help people. Don't worry about your families like judging you. Like my grandma, like it's weird because like I'm healing from this infection. I felt different and like thinking a little bit better, and like she's weirded out by it. Like it's like, oh, I don't know. She is dying, so that could just be a bad news. But sometimes she treats me really well, and like she's glad to see me. It's good. People like it. It's the surface cover, and it's not because they're doing a bunch of Agenda 21. So there's effects that they want from those things in general, but it's almost like it covers up layers, right? Keeps people like, oh my God, like an important things like we may not have food. We may have to stand in the food line. May lose my job. Could be killed in a fire with BLM Antifa burned down buildings. Um, I kind of forgot where I was going with this, but it's a lot of stuff, a lot of not distraction, very very evil things happening to people.
Year after the coronavirus outbreak was declared a pandemic, President Biden signed the historic economic stimulus bill, with checks rising for some Americans.
Johnson & Johnson. BNSF Railway. The Kendeda Fund, committed to advancing restorative justice and meaningful work through investments in transformative leaders and ideas. More at KendedaFund.org. Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and the advancement of international peace and security at Carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to a PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
It was 1 year ago today that the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, upending life as we knew it then. The last 12 months have been marked by unimaginable loss, topping 530,000 deaths in the U.S. alone. That is more than one death every minute since the pandemic began. The economic toll has also been immense. This week, Congress passed a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill with only Democratic support. And this afternoon, President Biden signed it into law.
This historic legislation is about rebuilding the backbone of this country and giving people in this nation, working people, middle-class folks, people who built the country, a fighting chance. That's what the essence of it is.
We'll get some details of what to expect from President Biden's address later in the program from our Yamiche Alcindor. But first, we want to delve into the new COVID relief law. And we get two views, starting with the Senate's top Republican, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, thank you very much for joining us. The bill President Biden signed today, you have said it's the worst piece of legislation you've seen pass in your time in the Senate. And yet it helps working class Americans. There is support in it for the unemployed. There is support for healthcare workers and for schools. And the polls are showing 70% of Americans like it. Why are they wrong?
Well, look, I'm not surprised that the American public's initial reaction to this, before they know what's in it, would be positive. I mean, the thought of many Americans getting a $1,400 check, why would they not like that? But let's look at the history of the pandemic, which really started about a year ago. We passed 5 bills last year, Judy, 5 of them. The biggest one being the CARES Act. On a bipartisan basis, not a single one of them got more than 8 votes in opposition. We just 2 months ago passed one of those 5, 900.
Something like, added to something like $8 trillion almost. So you're saying that's something that's only okay under a Republican president, are you?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that last year it was clearly justified based upon the pandemic. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been passed overwhelmingly on a bipartisan basis. But what they're trying to do this year, it's noteworthy, received not a single Republican vote in the House or Senate. You have to ask yourself, why? Why? Because this year is not last year. The economy is on the way back. This is going to be a great year for this one-party takeover of the way we conduct elections in this country. And there will be overwhelming total...
That Republican men and people who supported President Trump remain the most against getting a COVID vaccine. What would be your message to them?
With regard to the vaccine, as soon as I was eligible, I took it. I've encouraged everybody in my state to take it. And this shouldn't be a partisan issue, either mask wearing or getting the vaccination. Getting the vaccination is important. I would encourage everyone to do that without exception. They're proven safe and necessary if we're going to get this pandemic in the rearview mirror.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Judy.
And for a Democrat's view now, Senator...
While vaccinating teachers and paraprofessionals and providing another round of unemployment insurance are focused on restaurants. That's some of the many good things in this bill. It's popular. Our president has led us to this point, and I think it's going to lead to a strong recovery coming out of this pandemic later this year.
Senator, the Minority Leader also makes the point. He says that this comes at the wrong time to be spending all this money, because he says the forecasts are that the economy is just about to come roaring back. In other words, this is going to happen on its own, and Congress didn't need to do this.
Well, Judy, that's exactly the same argument the Minority Leader was making 6 months ago. There was a determined bipartisan effort by a group of senators to finally force that last bill, the $900 billion that we passed and that President Trump signed right at the end of December. This has been a long, hard slog.
as President Biden will make clear in his first national address after his inauguration later this evening, he has been relentlessly focused on helping us recover from this pandemic. The pandemic was far worse than it ever needed to be, and the recession caused by it far more painful than it ever needed to be. But President Biden is doing a strong job of leading us out of it. I think saying the American people should simply wait around and hope that our economy is going to recover, that we're going to come out of this pandemic without making more bold, necessary investments in our schools and hospitals and businesses and families is just the wrong thing at this time. So I was proud to vote for this bill, and I think it's essential for us moving forward. Senator, we heard President Biden say on a number of occasions he hoped there would be bipartisan support for this legislation, but not a single Republican is voting for it. How discouraging is that for the president? You know him very well. Well, Judy, Joe Biden is someone who didn't just run for office on bringing us together as a country and on working across the aisle with Republicans in the Congress. It's part of who he is. It's part of how he served as a senator for Delaware for 36 years. It's part of what Delaware asks of its elected leaders. And I know that Joe Biden will continue trying to work across the aisle, reaching out his hand. The very first meeting that he hosted in the Oval Office with members of the Senate was with 10 Republicans. And two of the younger Republicans, newer in their service in the Senate, said to me afterwards, they were impressed and surprised at how well he knew the numbers, how well he knew their proposal. It was supposed to be an hour meeting, and the president himself was the one who extended it to a second hour. Even during the week of the impeachment trial, President Biden had over a bipartisan group of 4 senators to talk about one of our future priorities, infrastructure, and how we could make progress on that. It's part of who Joe Biden has always been, and it's part of how he hopes to bring us together. But frankly, the fact that this bill is so supported by the American people on a strong bipartisan basis, I think shows that he is making progress on things that are a priority for the American people, even if on this first big bill, he wasn't able to get any Republicans to come across the aisle and join him in the gap. Senator, finally, very quickly, because I know you talk to Republicans probably more than most other Democrats do. Do you get the sense that there will be Republican support for the infrastructure bill or for the bill with regard to racial justice coming in? I literally had a conversation on the floor of the Senate this afternoon on one of the most senior and central Republicans for infrastructure, who was asking me whether I think there will be time for us to work together on some bipartisan initiatives around infrastructure, and I'm optimistic that there will be. I spoke with another Republican last night about a bipartisan effort that Senator Schumer is leading to pull together a bill to confront China and to make our country more competitive, investing in manufacturing and in research and in onshoring supply chains. There's a number of initiatives, Judy, where I think it is possible for us to make progress on a bipartisan basis, and I'm going to be engaged in those. It's what Joe Biden wants, it's what the American people expect, and I think it is what will make us stronger on the world stage if we're able to move forward with bipartisan legislation across a wide range of areas. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, we thank you. Thank you, Judy. In the day's other news, the U.S. House of Representatives opened. In Miami, where people crouched in the street and then ran. Security forces opened fire. Killings were also reported in 4 other cities. Mainland China's ceremonial legislature has endorsed a move to tighten control over Hong Kong again. The measure approved today lets the central government name more of the territory's lawmakers. The vote in the National People's Congress was 2,895 to 0. Leaders insisted that U.S. calls for greater autonomy. The heir to the British throne, Prince William, Mississippi's Republican governor signed a ban today on transgender athletes joining female sports teams. The bill takes effect July 1st, pending legal challenges, and 20 states are considering similar legislation. In economic news, new claims for unemployment benefits fell to 712,000 last week in a sign that layoffs are easing. That news and the COVID relief package boost a different time ahead. Amna Nawaz is here with personal recollections of how life in the U.S. was transformed and the challenges of this past year.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
In the year since that ominous announcement on March 11th of 2020, life in America has changed drastically. The U.S. has seen more than 525,000 deaths from COVID-19 and upwards of 29 million confirmed cases. There have been lockdowns, school closures, and economic collapse. Inequality has gotten worse. Our hospitals have been overwhelmed. It's been a year of pain, disruption, and incredible stress.
Thank you for making the time. It's a lot to cover.
In recent weeks, we've spoken to more than a dozen Americans, a frontline nurse, a single mother, a public health official, and many more who were sick or even lost someone to coronavirus. They shared with us their memories and their stories of pandemic life over the last 12 months.
When do you remember everything kind of changing in the pandemic for you? Is there a day?
Yes, climbing the stairs to the 6th floor. My legs just could not go anymore. And I came home, did not remember the drive.
COVID, and he showed up to the emergency department and was really sick, and they didn't test him for COVID. And so thinking about how that is actually affecting my family, and the fact that I, even as a physician, have to worry that my family is not going to get the best care is just so upsetting, because who knows if my uncle had been tested when he first came to the emergency department, he would have survived. The thing that I worry about a lot with my Black patients, with my Latinx patients, with my poor patients.
I can't work, I can't breathe when I have a mask on, which we all know is not true. That was so frustrating for us to have to do that. But really, it was just another example of politicians kind of co-opting public health response to this pandemic.
I think the thing that I anticipated the least, actually, was just how we would normalize all the deaths, how we would normalize, like, all the kids, like, stuck at home and essential workers, like, going into these workplaces over and over, like, just that it could get so bad and seem so normal.
Vaccine by May 1st. So it doesn't mean that everyone will be able to get a vaccine by May 1st, but that will mean that all adults in America will be eligible to get one. The administration and the president will be saying that despite that push, what we're seeing is a number of Americans saying that they are still very hesitant to get this vaccine. Today, we released a new poll from PBS NewsHour, NPR, and the Marist and Banner's poll. Here's what some Americans said. 30% of all Americans say they will not choose to be vaccinated. Of that number,
White House, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now to Japan and another solemn anniversary. It's been a decade since a 9-point...
At any moment, but there is about a 70% possibility of it happening in the next 30 years, and the government is preparing on the premise that it will happen.
Tokyo scheduled due to the coronavirus pandemic. A reminder that even the best laid plans may not pan out. Different torches were lit today, candles across Tokyo. And at 2:46 p.m., the exact time the earthquake struck, a moment of silence to remember the loss.
Has no longer has any stores, the services, even if it were considered quote-unquote safe to return to, one couldn't return to. All of those is to reopen. Let's face it, Japan is a geologically unstable part of the world. I mean, it suffers, there was just an earthquake recently, a couple of weeks ago. So Japan has geological problems that are far greater than most of the United States and its nuclear reactors. So The Japanese government can claim that it's made its reactors safe and toughened up its regulations, but the simple fact of the matter is that Japan never should have built nuclear reactors.
We escape now to Mexico to discover a vibrant art world. Jeffrey Brown filmed this story before the pandemic, and this encore look is part of our ongoing coverage of art and culture, Canvas.
It's called Zona Maco, and it's become Latin America's biggest annual art fair. Throngs of art lovers packing a sprawling conference center on the northwest edge of Mexico City. Major galleries from the U.S., Europe, and South America, as well as Mexico, showing art of all kinds.
I always thought it would work, but I never thought it would become as big as it is now.
Angelica Garcia founded Zona Maco 18 years ago, and has seen it grown to 200 plus exhibitors showing some 800 artists. International in scope, but now the center of a thriving local scene.
I think an artist has to rely on their local collectors first. And we grow with the local market. If the local market had not started buying more, the fair would still be 70 galleries.
Over 5 days, the fair attracted some 72,000 visitors.
We are a good part of Mexico. If you come for the art fair, you don't have to see the ugly part.
Mexico has been a cosmopolitan art center for at least a century. Just think of the famous murals of Diego Rivera and others. But today, signs of the place as a contemporary art hub are all around. With new museums and spectacular architecture has changed the skyline of this ancient capital. An annual art week in February has grown up around Zona Maco and featured smaller fairs like 7-year-old Material, which takes place in an old Kailai arena and attracts a decidedly younger crowd. Indeed, younger artists from the U.S. and elsewhere are flocking to Mexico City these days, attracted by the lower cost and hip vibe. So, the poverty, the violence, and the horror of drug cartel murders and disappearances, all that is never far away. Many artists are addressing it directly. Luz Maria Sanchez joined a group of women in the northern state of Sinaloa in search of remains of loved ones who disappeared amid drug violence. Her art piece, an 8-channel recording, presented the sound. Footsteps. Chatter. Picks and shovels working the dirt. To keep us right there. This is art that aims for social impact.
How do you deal with empathy? That was one of my main questions. First of all, how do you survive within this context of extreme violence? Because the loved ones are taken away and we don't know if they're dead or alive.
It's very real for them.
It's very real. But second, how you make other groups of citizens in Mexico to understand and maybe have some empathy with them.
Ray Sanchez is also a college professor, and she sees her students tackling serious issues in their work: violence, pollution, freedom of speech.
They are putting together these kind of exhibitions, and they're always very critical about their surroundings.
Trying to address the social issues through the art.
Because that's their reality.
Art does stir passions here, including protests at the famed Palacio de Bellas Artes, at an exhibition on revolutionary hero Emiliano Zapata. Some of the works were documentary, some reverential, but many were angered by a painting that showed a naked Zapata in a pink sombrero and high heels. Art and gay rights advocates defended the work. Ultimately, the museum installed a wall text saying Zapata's family disagreed with the depiction. People we spoke with also worry that budget cuts by the administration of President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador will have negative consequences for cultural life here. The government support has traditionally been strong. But at the influential University Museum of Contemporary Art, chief curator Cuauhtemoc Medina says global trends in art are firmly embedded here. For PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown in Mexico City.
For teenagers, this year of quarantine and remote school forced an unprecedented experiment in learning and coping. We asked our network of student journalists to reflect on how their world has changed and what they're looking forward to once the pandemic is over. Here's a sample.
It's been a year. COVID-19. The virus has changed everything for everyone.
It's very overwhelming in this time just to exist.
I think the pandemic affected me the most was mainly through sports. So there was a solid 8 months where we just had no sports, no hope.
I hate leaving the house. And I hate my car just sitting outside. It's my car's in road red. It wants to go skirt.
I mean, first thing I'd love to do again is go to a movie theater. I've not been to a movie theater probably over a year.
The pandemic has also made me a lot more of a humble person, more empathetic, I'd say.
Last year, I didn't really take care of myself mentally or physically. Now I work out every morning and eat healthier.
I became more social with my brother, and I've had to make new friends in the neighborhood because others live in other parts of the town, but some live right around the corner from me.
I feel that I'm a very different person than I was a year ago. I also live around nicer and more compassionate. And some lessons I've learned throughout that time are to not judge people based on what I know, because I really don't know what they're going through. I also lost a great family friend due to COVID named Juan back in October. Juan was my grandmother's best friend. My favorite times with him were when he took me and my grandmother to different parts.
I learned anything. I learned that life is too short to be wasting time and putting your energy towards the wrong things.
I began to learn how to manage my schedule better, and most importantly, I began to learn how to self-motivate myself and see each day as a new opportunity.
I didn't really know what I wanted to do until this year. I'm either going to be a special education teacher or a nurse, and I think it'd be great to be.
Mediated as our lives are by this glass, they are separated from us by this gate of a forced choice. We need to recognize that that is not consent, and the law needs to recognize that that is not consent. The companies need to recognize that is not consent, and the only way that that happens is if we recognize that that is not consent, not in any way that really matters. And I think that is what's happening today. I think that's what we see around the world. I think that's for a lot